Real life stories narrated from the experiences of R2K. Echoes of the past. After my dad finished his story, we bombarded him with questions, eager to understand more about the old man, the family history, and the strange events surrounding our home. But before he could answer, he concluded with a revelation. My grandmother, sensing that my father was getting too attached to the supernatural, became reluctant to discuss the family's ancestors any further. She was especially evasive when it came to talking about my great-grandfather, as if these topics were off-limits, shrouded in secrecy. It wasn't just my dad who was affected by this. His siblings, particularly my uncle, who now lived in the other section of the house, were also deeply curious. This shared fascination with the supernatural brought my dad and uncle closer together as kids. They would often discuss the eerie occurrences in the house, trading theories and trying to piece together the puzzle of our family's past. My uncle, according to my dad, was particularly persistent in his quest for answers. He became convinced that some kind of treasure was hidden within the house. A treasure linked to the dark secrets that seemed to haunt our family. Years later, when life's responsibilities took over, my dad's focus shifted away from these mysteries. With school, college, and eventually his move to the hostel for his bachelor's degree, he let the whole situation fade into the background. But my uncle never gave up. His interest in our great-grandfather, the original heir, only deepened over time. My dad mentioned that his brother was always drawn to their grandfather, who had died young under mysterious circumstances. My uncle seemed to believe that the key to understanding everything lay in the story of this man, my great-grandfather. I couldn't help but wonder why my dad had stopped searching for answers. Wasn't this history connected to the strange occurrences we were experiencing now? And what about my uncle's obsession with our great-grandfather? What made him so important? Was he the one who had been killed, as the old man had hinted? But that didn't add up. He was already the heir. And what of the treasure? What exactly was my uncle searching for? Could it be real, or was it just a desperate attempt to make sense of the unexplained? My dad mentioned other stories that night. Stories of people seeing the old man in the orchard just sitting there. It wasn't just one person, but multiple witnesses had seen him in the same spot where he and my dad had their final conversation. Hearing this made me feel a deep sense of sorrow for the old man. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trapped in this house by the same curse, unable to move on. I felt a heavy weight on my chest, as if something was urging me to help him, to find a way to break the cycle that kept him bound to this place. That night, sleep eluded me. The weight of all this new information pressed down on me, making it impossible to rest. But there was one thing that didn't sit right with me. Out of all of my dad's siblings, only he and my uncle had stayed in his house. My dad had once mentioned that he never intended to settle down here. He had a good job in the Middle East and planned to stay there for the rest of his life. Yet, as fate would have it, we ended up in this house. Was it destiny? Were they somehow bound to this place? I tried to dismiss these thoughts, convincing myself that the idea of a curse was irrational. Whatever had happened to my father, his siblings, and their families was nothing more than coincidence. But the mystery of the treasure lingered in my mind. Could it actually exist? The old man had spoken of jinns that roamed the house freely. Had they brought the treasure with them, or was it something my great-grandfather had hidden before his untimely death? And if the treasure was real, where in the house could it possibly be concealed? In the midst of these thoughts, I found myself walking down a dark road. But something was wrong. I didn't recognize this place. It was too dark, too unfamiliar. I kept moving, desperate to find some light. In the distance, I saw a house with a kerosene lamp glowing faintly outside. I made my way toward it, hoping the light would offer some solace. As I approached the house, I noticed shadows moving inside, people talking and laughing as if enjoying a gathering. But as I got closer, unease gripped me. There was something off about the scene. My body started to shake, a deep fear taking hold. Just as I was about to peer through the window, I jolted awake. Drenched in sweat, the room was dark. The time was 3:15 a.m. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that the shaking I'd felt wasn't just in the dream. It had been real, or had it? I couldn't be sure if the bed had actually shaken, or if it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I tried to calm myself, but every little sound made me jump. My nerves were on edge, my imagination running wild. I kept opening my eyes, half expecting to see a shadow or some other ominous presence in the room. I dared not look under the bed, too afraid of what I might find. Just then, I heard my mother stirring in the next room, getting up to drink a glass of water. The sound of her movement brought me a small measure of comfort, enough to finally push the fear away. I took a deep breath and settled back into bed, determined to get some rest. But even as I drifted off, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That the curse wasn't just an old story, but a living, breathing force that was slowly closing in on us all.